Moscow is burning, not metaphorically, not rhetorically, literally burning. Fires rage at Russia's most strategically important oil refinery. Smoke columns rise from a chip manufacturing plant that supplies microelectronics for precision weapons. An oil pumping station feeding the capital's fuel network is in flames. More than 200 flights at Sheremetyevo, Moscow's largest and busiest airport, are canceled or diverted. And across the skyline of one of the most heavily defended cities on the planet, Russian residents are filming what they cannot believe their own eyes are seeing. Ukrainian drones flying overhead, not one or two, but hundreds, weaving through 4 rings of layered air defense systems like the entire network does not exist. This is not supposed to happen. Moscow was supposed to be untouchable. And then Russia made a catastrophic mistake. On May 14th, 2026, Putin's military carried out what Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy described as a massive and virtually non-stop aerial assault that lasted close to 48 hours. Russia launched more than 1,560 drones against Ukrainian cities since Wednesday of that week, as Zelenskyy confirmed. He said 56 cruise missiles were added to that barrage in the overnight hours. The Kyiv mayor declared it the largest scale attack on the capital this year. A 9-story apartment building in Kyiv's Darnitsky district was obliterated by a Kh-101 cruise missile. 24 people were pulled from the rubble. 3 of them were children, born in 2008, 2010, and 2013. They never saw adulthood. Russia made a mistake, a massive, historic, unforgivable mistake, because Ukraine does not need permission to hit back anymore. And hit back it did, in a way that Moscow has not experienced since the Second World War. You are watching States News. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because what happened in Moscow on the night of May 17th, 2026 is a turning point in this war. And we are going to break down every single detail of what took place, why it matters, and what comes next. Let us set the stage properly, because context is everything here. This war entered a new chapter in early May 2026. After a brief ceasefire that allowed Russia to hold its annual Victory Day parade on May 9th, commemorating the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany, both sides almost immediately accused each other of violating the pause in hostilities. Russia and Ukraine swapped 205 prisoners of war, each on May 15th, part of a 1,000 for 1,000 exchange brokered with help from the United Arab Emirates. It was a moment of cooperation. It was also a brief, fragile illusion. Because Russia's aerial assault on Kyiv began in the very same window, deliberately timed, deliberately calculated to maximize damage. As Zelenskyy told the Ukrainian people in a statement reported by CBS News on May 15th, this is a deliberate terrorist tactic by the Russians, who amassed drones and missiles over a period of time and intentionally calculated the strike so that its scale would be significant, creating the greatest possible difficulties for our air defense. He added, it certainly cannot be called a coincidence that one of the longest massive Russian attacks against Ukraine takes place precisely at the time when the President of the United States arrived for a visit to China. Think about what that means. Russia saw a diplomatic moment, a moment of global attention focused on a U.S.-China summit, and chose to use it to murder 24 civilians, 3 of them children. Russia chose that moment to unleash the largest 2-day aerial barrage Ukraine had faced since this war began in 2022. The attack ran for close to 48 hours. It hit 180 sites across Ukraine, including more than 50 residential buildings. In Kharkiv, at least 28 more people were injured. The Kyiv office of drone manufacturer Skyton was destroyed. Energy infrastructure across multiple regions was damaged, including a power substation and high-voltage lines in the capital itself. This was not a military operation. This was mass punishment of a civilian population. Zelenskyy visited the rubble of the destroyed apartment building on May 15th, laying red roses at the site, and said simply, "The world must remember the price Ukraine pays every day so that Russian aggression does not spread to other nations." But Zelenskyy did not stop at mourning. He gave an order. "I have instructed Ukraine's military to prepare possible formats for our response," he said, as reported by the Kyiv Independent. That response, he made clear, would be entirely justified. And when Ukraine responds to being justified in this war, it responds with extraordinary precision and extraordinary scale. The world had to wait only hours. Here is where it gets remarkable. Ukraine launched its retaliation, and this retaliation lasted for exactly 48 hours, the same duration as Russia's attack on Ukraine. This was not a coincidence. This was a message delivered in the universal language of military symmetry. You bomb us for 48 hours. We bomb you for 48 hours. Welcome to the new reality. Russia's defense ministry itself confirmed in a statement that reveals the true scale of what Ukraine unleashed that they had intercepted more than 1,000 drones in a single day. That number is not coming from Ukraine. That number is coming from Moscow. As reported by NPR and the Associated Press, Russian air defenses destroyed 556 drones over Russia overnight, with an additional count that brought the total above 1,000 within 24 hours across all regions. State agency TASS reported that 81 drones alone were shot down heading specifically for Moscow. If Russia claims those interceptions as a victory, consider what that number means. Ukraine launched enough drones that Russia needed to claim over 1,000 kills in a single day just to manage the optics of what was happening to their capital. And now think about how many got through. Because many got through. The evidence is burning. The Moscow oil refinery in the Kapotnya district, one of the 10 largest refineries in Russia, owned by Gazprom Neft, processing approximately 245,000 barrels of oil per day and supplying around 40% of the fuel needs of the greater Moscow region, was struck by a drone. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin confirmed the hit, according to reporting by Kyiv Post. An explosion was triggered. 12 workers were injured. This was one of the most heavily protected industrial sites in all of Russia. It sat inside the concentric rings of Moscow's air defense architecture. A single Ukrainian drone, costing a fraction of the interceptors deployed against it, penetrated all of that and struck a facility central to fueling Moscow's daily life, and more importantly, fueling Russia's military-grade diesel supply. The Solnechnogorsk oil pumping station was also struck. According to the Ukrainian General Staff statement, this facility is a critical part of the circular oil product pipeline around Moscow and is used for pumping, storing, and shipping large volumes of gasoline and diesel fuel, including for the Russian army. The Solnechnogorsk fires burned for hours and could be seen from tens of miles away. The Solnechnogorsk facility is a transit node directly connected to the major pipeline rings encircling Moscow. Striking it does not just cause damage, it disrupts the circulatory system of fuel logistics feeding the Russian military machine. And Ukraine was not done. In Zelenskyy, a district northwest of Moscow that is Russia's answer to Silicon Valley, the center of its domestic electronics and microchip industry, Ukrainian drones struck the Angstrom enterprise. As the Ukrainian General Staff stated, this facility specializes in the production of high-tech products and microchips for high-precision weapons and is an important component of the Russian military-industrial complex involved in the production of microelectronics, radio electronics, optical systems, and robotics for the enemy's military needs. Angstrom is under strict U.S. sanctions. A fire was recorded across the facility's grounds. Kyiv Post, citing OSINT analysis from independent outlet Astra, confirmed the strike's success. Drone debris also fell on the grounds of Sheremetyevo International Airport, Moscow's largest. As CGTN and NPR both reported, this triggered more than 200 flight cancellations and diversions. Footage from inside the airport circulated online. Check-in counters shut down, departure boards frozen, passengers stranded. The airport was effectively paralyzed for hours, and the attack did not stop at Moscow. Simultaneously, Ukraine launched one of the most geographically expansive drone campaigns of the entire war. As reported by Euromaidan Press, Ukraine's unmanned systems forces struck a Russian Project 10410 Svetlyak patrol ship of the FSB border service near Kaspisk in Russia's Republic of Dagestan, approximately 100 kilometers from the Ukrainian front line. This was the fourth Russian ship struck in the Caspian Sea during May 2026 alone. Ukraine had already hit a Project 2800 Karakurt small missile ship on May 7th and a small missile ship alongside a minesweeper on May 15th, all near Russia's Caspian flotilla base. A sea that Moscow long treated as a safe rear is burning. In Crimea, Ukraine's security service struck air defense systems at an airfield in the occupied peninsula. In Luhansk, an air defense system was neutralized. In the Ryazan region, approximately 122 miles southeast of Moscow, the massive Ryazan oil refinery, one of Russia's largest fuel production facilities, with an output of more than 17.1 million tons of oil per year, was hit. A large fire burned, confirmed by Kyiv Post reporting from May 15th. In the Astrakhan region, a Gazprom gas condensate processing unit capable of producing up to 3 million tons annually was struck separately, halting motor fuel production after fire broke out. At the fuel loading station in the village of Durakino outside Moscow, fires burned for hours. In Kyiv, drones struck a private house. In Mytishchi, 2 people were killed in residential strikes. In the Istra district, 4 more were injured, and it is now confirmed that every weapon used in the Moscow region attack was Ukrainian-made, not foreign supplied, not imported, designed and built inside Ukraine. According to the Ukrainian General Staff, as confirmed by Ukrainska Pravda and multiple outlets, the systems deployed included the RS-1 Bars, the FP-1 Firepoint, and the Bars SM Gladiator. The Bars drone missile, Kyiv Post reported, uses a mid-wing configuration with a fuselage of composite materials built from a minimal number of parts to speed up production and cut costs. Ukraine is manufacturing precision weapons at scale, under war conditions, faster and cheaper than Russia can intercept them. That is the single most important strategic fact in this entire story. Ukraine no longer needs anyone's permission to strike Russia. It builds the weapons. It flies them. It chooses the targets. This is 2026, not 2022. The equation has fundamentally changed. This is a good moment to pause. If you are watching States News and you have not yet subscribed, this is the right time. Hit the subscribe button, enable notifications, because the weapons, the strategy, and the targets Ukraine is now deploying represent a seismic shift in how this war is being fought, and we are going to get into exactly why and exactly what it means for what comes next. Let us talk about Moscow's air defense problem, because this is a story that is bigger than any single attack. Putin has invested massively in protecting his capital. Moscow is defended by 4 concentric rings of multi-layered air defense systems, S-400 batteries, Pantsir S-1 gun missile systems, Tor M2 systems, radar coverage designed to detect incoming threats at distance, Q interceptors, and eliminate them before they reach the city. Putin sold this architecture to his people as an absolute guarantee. Moscow was safe. The war was far away. The capital would never know what Ukrainian cities have felt for over 4 years. That guarantee has now expired. And here is the truly devastating part for the Kremlin. Some of the fires lit inside Moscow were not caused by Ukrainian drones getting through. They were caused by Russian air defense missiles. As resident accounts cited in the original footage from the night of May 17th confirmed, Russian surface-to-air missiles fell on apartment buildings and civilian structures after their guidance systems failed or their targets evaded them. Interceptor missiles that miss their drone target do not simply disappear. They land somewhere. And in a densely populated city, that somewhere is often residential. Moscow's air defense, in trying to protect the capital, accidentally turned Russian interceptor missiles into instruments of destruction aimed at Russian civilians. The panic that spread through Moscow that night was unlike anything the city had experienced in living memory. Residents who have spent 4 years watching the war play out on screens, reading about destroyed Ukrainian cities in state media, suddenly found themselves filming Ukrainian drones with their own phones, something that is technically illegal inside Russia. They filmed anyway because the cognitive shock was too great. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of videos flooded Telegram and TikTok in hours. One woman near the airport described it in a clip that circulated widely. "I live near here. Where did it explode this time? The hell is this? I'm so sick of this." Another resident described waking at 4 a.m, lying under a blanket, fully dressed, shaking. There was this buzzing sound. It was like something was flying right over our house. I was scared. I was just shaking. Crowds formed in stairwells. Families rushed to cars. A 76-year-old woman said she woke to find her balcony window blown out. "I never imagined the damage would be this bad," she said. "We don't have a proper bomb shelter here." Ukrainians have been living inside that reality every single day for more than 4 years. There is also an important detail about GPS jamming that explains the airport incident. Russia has been jamming GPS signals across its territory for over 2 years, primarily to confuse Ukrainian drones. As a result, some drones lose precision guidance and fall wherever they happen to be when their navigation fails. The drone debris at Sheremetyevo was likely not a precise targeting choice. It was a side effect of Russia's own electronic warfare environment. Russia's attempt to blind Ukrainian drones is literally causing uncontrolled hardware to fall on its own infrastructure. Now, Russia's state media response to all of this was entirely predictable, and it was staggering in its brazenness. Russian state broadcaster VGTRK reported that air defense forces had repelled one of the most massive Ukrainian drone raids of the entire special military operation, calling it a defensive success. Moscow Mayor Sobyanin's office issued a statement confirming that air defenses had shot down more than 120 drones over the capital in 24 hours, framing the destruction as a victory of Russian air power, not a penetration of Moscow's defenses. The refineries burning, the semiconductor plant in Zelenskyy on fire, the fuel pipeline station offline. None of that appeared prominently in state media. But something significant happened that tells you everything about the internal credibility crisis the Kremlin now faces. Russian war bloggers, people who have been among the most vocal supporters of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, who have spent 4 years cheerleading the special military operation, have turned on the official narrative. As one prominent Russian war blogger named Romanov, cited in the original footage from this week, wrote sarcastically, "If you see with your own eyes something that contradicts the statements of official sources, don't believe your eyes." He was describing how the governor of another region had publicly claimed there was no damage from a drone strike on a chemical factory, while the factory was visibly engulfed in flames. Romanov called out the absurdity of the Kremlin's propagandists trying to maintain a reality-proof information bubble when the evidence was burning for everyone to see. This reminds us of what George Orwell wrote in 1984. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. Russia is issuing that command. Its own people are ignoring it, and the Ukrainian message that was delivered alongside this attack could not have been clearer. According to the statement from Ukrainian drone commanders that circulated after the operation concluded, a message was literally written on the wing of a drone heading toward Russian territory. One-sided subscription to a peaceful life is canceled. That message was hand-delivered to Moscow. Zelenskyy issued his own public statement confirming the strikes and explaining their purpose. Our responses to Russia's prolongation of the war and its attacks on our cities and communities are entirely justified, he said, as quoted by NPR. This time, Ukrainian long-range strikes have reached the Moscow region, and we are clearly telling the Russians their state must end its war. Ukrainian drone and missile manufacturers continue their work. The distance from Ukraine's state border is over 500 kilometers, roughly 300 miles. The concentration of Russian air defenses in the Moscow region is the highest, but Ukraine is overcoming it all. Those last 6 words deserve to be read again. Ukraine is overcoming it all, not working around Russia's defenses, not occasionally slipping through, overcoming systematically with domestically manufactured weapons that Russia did not anticipate Ukraine being able to produce at this scale. The Nigel Gould-Davies assessment is worth dwelling on here. As a senior fellow for Russia and Eurasia at the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London, Gould-Davies told the Associated Press that Ukraine's attack brings home the fact Ukraine has the capacity to strike at very significant scale at or around the Russian capital, taking the war home to Russians in a way that would be most unwelcome to the Kremlin. He added that Russia's battlefield setbacks, its deteriorating economic situation, and the Kremlin's intensifying crackdown on internet access inside Moscow and St. Petersburg were already creating what he described as a darkening cloud of anxiety over Russia. The drone strikes over Moscow, he said, are likely to intensify the mix of concerns among the Russian population. And here is the moment that perhaps captures the true historical weight of what just happened. 2 days after Moscow burned, on May 17th, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters that the Kremlin is interested in restoring dialogue with Ukraine. This statement appeared just hours after the largest Ukrainian drone attack on Moscow in memory concluded. Peskov offered no formal explanation for the timing. He did not need to. The timing was the explanation. This is the same Kremlin that has spent 4 years denying any military failures, dismissing any notion that the war is going wrong, and claiming victory after victory in state media. Now the spokesman is announcing interest in dialogue from Moscow. Surrounded by drone smoke, there is a word for that. It is called consequence. Let us put this all in strategic context, because this is bigger than one night of burning refineries. Ukraine has executed what military analysts would describe as a long-range precision attrition campaign against Russia's military-industrial infrastructure. The Angstrom facility in Zelenskyy does not just make chips, it makes the chips that go inside Russia's precision-guided missiles, the same weapons that killed 24 civilians in Kyiv's Darnitsky district just days earlier. Strike Angstrom and you are not just damaging a factory. You are attacking the production chain for the weapon that killed 3 children in their apartment. The Moscow oil refinery in Kyiv does not just supply civilian fuel. It supplies military-grade diesel for Russia's armed forces. Strike it, and you are degrading Russia's ability to sustain armored operations, logistics, and transportation infrastructure across multiple fronts. The Solnechny-Gorsk pipeline pumping station does not just feed gas stations, it feeds the circular fuel ring around Moscow that supplies military stockpiles. Strike it, and you are tightening the economic and logistical noose. Ukraine is not hitting random targets. It is hitting the specific nodes in Russia's war-sustaining industrial system, and it is doing so from over 500 kilometers away with weapons it built itself without anyone's permission. The broader context here is equally significant. As reported by the Kyiv Independent, Ukraine separately reported the destruction of 46 high-value Russian military and naval assets during the full scope of this week's operations. That includes the FSB patrol vessel in the Caspian Sea. That includes the air defense system in Luhansk. That includes a B-200 amphibious aircraft, a Ka-27 helicopter, a cargo vessel carrying ammunition, and a Pantsir S-1 surface-to-air missile system, all listed in Zelenskyy's public accounting of the week's strikes published on his official channels. At the same time, Ukrainian drones are striking Russian oil facilities from the Black Sea coast to Astrakhan, producing fires visible from space and causing what the Moscow Times reported is toxic black rain over tourist destinations on Russia's Black Sea coast. Benzene levels in Tuapse, where the Rosneft refinery has been repeatedly struck, have reached levels so high that Russian health authorities have advised residents to limit outdoor exposure, keep windows closed, and wear masks outside. Public events were canceled in the city. The Rosneft refinery there had already stopped operations after a previous attack in April. Ukraine is systematically dismantling Russia's ability to fund and fuel its war machine, one drone at a time. But there is something even more significant that deserves to be said clearly. This operation represents the full realization of a strategic transformation that has been underway in Ukraine for 2 years. In 2022, Ukraine needed permission slips from Western allies before it could use foreign-supplied weapons to strike specific targets on Russian soil. In 2026, Ukraine builds its own weapons, chooses its own targets, and asks nobody. The RS-1 bars that hit the Zelenskyy chip plant was not built in the United States. It was not shipped from Europe. It was designed and manufactured inside Ukraine under wartime conditions by Ukrainian engineers in distributed production facilities that have been hardened against exactly the kind of strikes Russia keeps launching. The Skyton drone manufacturer's Kyiv office was destroyed in Russia's May 14th barrage. Skyton's own statement said, "We understood that sooner or so Skyton could become a target for the Russians, so we had prepared for this scenario in advance by relocating our production facilities to different parts of Ukraine and abroad." Ukraine's defense industry planned for this. It dispersed, it adapted, it kept building. Russia bombed a building. Ukraine relocated the factory. Russia bombed the city. Ukraine built more drones. Now, what comes next? The honest answer is that this escalation is not going to de-escalate cleanly or quickly. Ukraine has demonstrated that it can reach Moscow at will with domestically produced weapons at a scale that overwhelms Russia's most layered air defenses. That capability does not disappear. If anything, it grows. Ukraine is now reportedly opening 10 weapons export centers in Europe in 2026, a signal that its domestic production capacity has not just met its own needs, but has begun to generate export-grade capacity. Russia faces a fundamental dilemma. If it escalates in Ukraine, Ukraine escalates back directly into Moscow, directly into Russia's critical infrastructure, directly into the fuel and weapons pipelines that keep the Russian military functioning. The cost-benefit calculation that has underpinned Putin's war strategy since 2022, attack Ukraine, suffer no comparable cost on Russian soil, is no longer operational. It expired over the skies of Moscow on the night of May 17th. Gould Davies of the International Institute for Strategic Studies was measured but clear in his assessment, telling the Associated Press that even these developments, taken together with Russia's battlefield setbacks and economic deterioration, are unlikely in the short term to force Russia toward the kind of compromises necessary for peace negotiations. But he is describing the short term. The longer the Russian population watches its capital burn while state media tells them there is no damage, the harder it becomes to sustain the information architecture that has kept domestic opposition to this war contained. Russian war bloggers are already calling out the Kremlin. Russian citizens are filming what they are not supposed to film. Russian elites in protected Moscow neighborhoods are watching their own air defense missiles fall on their buildings. The war has come home for Russia, not as a metaphor, not as a geopolitical concept, as fire, as smoke, as drones flying over Sheremetyevo Airport, as a refinery in Kapotnya that supplies 40% of Moscow's fuel burning through the night. As a Ukrainian drone commander wrote on the wing of a drone that flew more than 500 kilometers to make a point, one-sided subscription to a peaceful life is canceled. For 4 years, Ukrainians lived that reality while Russia watched safely from behind its borders. That asymmetry is over. And as Zelenskyy put it with the kind of directness that history tends to remember, war is returning to where it came from, to Moscow. If you have watched this far and you are not subscribed to States News, do it now. We will be tracking every development as this conflict continues to evolve. The next phase of this war is being shaped in the skies above Moscow tonight, in the production lines of Ukrainian drone factories, and in the decisions being made right now in Kyiv and the Kremlin. This is where history is being written. We will keep you right in the middle of it. Stay with States News.